for all things real estate in the Charlotte metro region. I'm Ann Rudd with LPT Realty and the Ann Rudd Group, and happy Friday, TGIF. I hope you have some big plans for the weekend. I am showing houses 2 solid days and maybe on Monday, so we will see how that rolls out. I will not be here on Monday. It's a holiday. Go hang out on Memorial Day. Remember why it's Memorial Day. And I have a family member that was killed in Afghanistan a few years ago, and I do remember that day and him very fondly and with sadness. So we got some fun stuff to talk about today. So yesterday we talked a little bit about, we kind of talked a lot about listings and photo placement and just how important that is. Today we're going to talk a little bit about a couple of topics that I think are really important, especially one for sellers and buyers and the other for buyers. So number one, I read an article on realtor.com that if you are looking for a home, you really need to pay attention to this. If you look at a home that has stucco. Now, a lot of homes in this market, we have a bunch of stucco exterior homes. Most of them are more in the 600,000 and above price point, but I've seen them in all price points here. And I want to talk about it because this article really touches on things that I have experienced and I have seen in my career. So asking for a stucco inspection when buying a house could save you thousands. And one of the reasons that this kind of hits home for me is because I have had clients in the past buy and sell stucco homes. And when I'm listing them or dealing with a purchase of them, I kind of halfway hold my breath through those inspections because look, the stucco can be a very, very good exterior product for homes if it is applied correctly and it is maintained properly. The maintenance part of that a lot of times never gets handled. And so we end up with things like, we end up with stuff like all these rotten areas. One of the things that I've seen lately with several agents in my market is doing inspections, and then after the fact, especially one in particular, after the fact, they went to replace windows and they pulled out the windows and there was nothing but rot all the way around the windows. And they just had to peel everything off and redo to the tune of about $150,000. So guys, if you are considering a purchase and the home has stucco, you have to inspect. Now, let's talk about North Carolina and our contracts for a minute, because there are non-invasive inspections and there are invasive inspections. And our contract says that they are to be non-invasive inspections. You don't start poking holes in stuff. You don't start looking behind walls. And, the problem in this part of the world is we are a subtropical climate. We have humidity. Humidity can creep into places that it doesn't need to be, and it can destroy a home from the inside out if things aren't prepared properly, installed properly, and maintained properly. Also, if we get it doesn't handle freezing temperatures very well. And y'all know we mostly have a moderate winter, but we've had some pretty cold days in the last 10 years and pretty cold stretches. And, stucco is great in dry, hot climates. It's great for that. It has a good insulation value or R value. It is not as expensive as a product. and it holds up very well. But in rainy or humid climates, it does not hold up as well. And, if you have, say we have a couple of years where we have a lot of cold weather, that stucco will contract, and when it warms up it expands, and when it gets really super cold again it contracts, and that constant contraction expansion can cause it to crack, and then it needs to be repaired properly, and that's a whole nother thing. So here's the thing with inspections. Non-invasive inspections are just what it sounds like. Inspectors are going to look around windows. They're going to look they're going to look at the entire home and look for places where there's cracking, any kind of peeling, anything like that. They can also do like a thermal test, and that thermal test will spot like cool areas or warm areas depending on what time of the year it is, and it can indicate some sort of internal like moisture. There is an invasive inspection where they kind of drill small holes around to access the inside of that home, and then they're going to test for moisture. Now, these tests can cost a little, they can cost a lot. Of course, if you want to do more invasive inspection, you're going to have to get that seller to give you permission to do so. And then you're going to have to repair that home back to its original look. So, that could cost a couple of $1,000s. And I just don't, people are afraid of the inspection cost. What I would be afraid of is what happens if you buy a home that has a significant amount of interior moisture that has gotten into the home, and you have a significant amount of wood rot. So that is what I am bothered by. And I am going to be showing this weekend several stucco homes. And I'm just not a fan of it because I'm afraid of it. So in this part of the world, be careful if you are looking at a home that has stucco on the exterior. Do not be afraid of the inspection costs. Insist on a stucco inspection. And this little section down here just says signs that a home does need a stucco inspection. So let's go through this because this is important. If you have any visible cracks, especially wide ones or horizontal ones, that's something to watch out for. Any brownish stains or bubbling paint, musty odors near exterior walls is a big one, and I have smelled that in a home before. Mold, mildew, or soft spots, and stucco pulling away from the wall are all red flags, and you should not ignore them. And then they say stucco can be a fantastic siding, but it has to be installed correctly and appropriately inspected. My biggest fear is having a client purchase a home with stucco exterior, we doing all the inspections, and then they do some work later on and find a mess. It is something that I am not a fan of. I think that there are so many other exterior coverings that you can find and not have to worry as much with them as with stucco. Stucco's scary to me. And I hope that this weekend my clients don't hone in on a house that's got stucco, because we're going to do some inspections on it because it just is frightening. All right, let's talk about something else that frightens me today. I think this is called Frighten Friday for me. So today I want to talk about flipped homes as well. Now, if you've been looking at a house and you've been looking at houses for any amount of time, I'm sure you've run into a flipped house. And I have run into quite a few in my day. And the thing that I know that I say about a flip house is that until proven otherwise, a flip house is lipstick on a pig. And we got to figure out how ugly that pig was before that lipstick was applied. Okay. So here is an article in realtor.com about we bought a flipped house and now it's falling apart. The telltale signs we wished we hadn't missed. There we go. So this couple bought a home in Allentown, Pennsylvania. Look at them. They got 2 kids, a little baby and a little girl, and that's them. They look cute. And they bought a house for $175,000 in Allentown, PA. And it was a flipped house. It had a recent renovation, including remodeled kitchen, updated appliances, new exterior siding, and a refinished roof. And I don't even know what in the heck a refinished roof sounds like. Okay. So here's what they did. They it all looked good, but the homeowner that was doing the renovations had cut a lot of corners. So when they moved in, they started seeing small things. A light in the living room didn't work. Dead electrical outlets didn't connect to any of the switches. Then they started getting more issues. Bathroom lights started flickering. And when you get into a situation like that, you got electrical problems. Okay. And whenever the hall light was turned on, the bathroom light started flickering. There is a draw of electricity somewhere that's pulling from the other. That's bad. That's really bad. A drain pipe in our laundry room overflowed, flooding our basement. And then big problems started. We bought our house in the fall, didn't have to use the AC until the summer. And on the first hot day of the year, they found out that the HVAC system, the AC, did nothing to cool the second floor of their home. The electrician said lights flickering was a byproduct of incorrectly installed fuses. A plumber said the reason our washer kept backing up was because it had been added to the same line as the kitchen, which was enough to cause frequent clogs. And the HVAC issue, they had used a wrong size unit for the home and installed attic ductwork in the basement. So what happened there was that air could not be pushed up effectively into the second floor. And they said that the most basic fix would cost something in the 5-digit range. Okay. And this article goes on to talk about the financial toll of buying a poorly flipped house. And guys, I'll tell you, a couple years ago, I had a client that bought a poorly flipped house. I tried to talk that client out of it. The home, I want to say, was built in the early 90s. I don't remember all the details, but so this was a 2023 purchase. And the home was built, let's just say 92. It was somewhere around 92, 94. So, but let's do 1990. Okay. So this home is 23 years old and had a 23-year-old HVAC system. So everything was original. Okay. My client was not interested in a home inspection. My client was convinced that a home inspection would not uncover anything. I did get my client to agree to an HVAC inspection. And so we knew exactly what was going on there. But after closing, the bathroom sinks in the primary suite and the shower were all clogged. No water would go down. And my client started finding more and more and more problems. Okay. So you have to inspect the hell out of any house you purchase, but especially if it's a flip. And, as much as I negotiated and beat up this agent it wasn't enough to make up for the problems this client had later. But I could not talk this client out of moving and just pull it out and go into another house. So when you are looking, especially at a flipped house or any home that's had renovations, what can you do? Well, the first thing you do, especially if you're in let's say you're in Mecklenburg County and you see a flipped house, You can go on Mecklenburg County's website and look at permits that were pulled for the property. Now, just because a permit is pulled and closed out doesn't mean that there won't be problems. But typically, if you have a contractor that's pulling permits on work done on a home, those permits mean that the city has to come out and inspect, and the inspections will uncover things if there are issues. Okay. So I like to see that. Any kind of electrical changes, plumbing changes, any changes to a home over $10,000 in repairs requires an inspector. It requires a permit. So, you've got to really inspect. I've always said you do a general home inspection, and then you bring in the specialists: roof, HVAC, plumbing, electrical, structural, if you need to. You bring all the heavy hitters to your inspections, so you know exactly what kind of house you're getting. Because in North Carolina, that home is sold as is, and it is your job as a buyer to uncover any and all problems. The seller has to disclose latent defects. The seller doesn't have to disclose anything else. And it is on you to inspect and be super, super careful with these flipped houses. They all look pretty until you start looking behind the curtain. And that's why I call them all lipstick on a pig. Have I run across some good flippers? Yes. Yes. I've run across some good flippers. Have I run across a lot of bad ones? Oh, hell yeah. And I don't think that the average American and, just the normal person that's going to buy a home, and I don't care what price point it's in, most people only buy and sell a handful of homes in their lifetime. And buying a home, unless you're doing it often, you're not going to be savvy with it. And if you have an agent that's never experienced a poorly flipped home, they may not be your best advocate. So if you look for a flipped home and you want to make an offer and buy a flipped home, you got to look at your bank account, because you really need to spring some money for some inspectors, and start by looking at permits. Because if, let's say, they renovated a kitchen and renovated all the bathrooms, and you go to Mecklenburg County and you pull up the permits and you don't see any permits, you can better believe that those permits weren't pulled and corners were cut. So whether you're looking for a stucco home, or you're looking at a stucco home to buy, or you have a stucco home that you want to sell, having an inspection report could help you quite a bit. If you're purchasing a stucco home, you want to inspect as thoroughly as you can. A moisture count, thermal detection for moisture or heat is important for a stucco home. And if you are looking to purchase a flipped home, you need to ensure and do all the inspections you possibly can, because you don't want to get surprised later with $20, $30, $50, $100,000 in repairs, because that home was not flipped, repaired, renovated properly. So that's what I got for you today. These are two little cautionary tales, two things that I am cautious about in our business, because they can seriously cost buyers a ton of money. So I hope you have a good weekend. If you want to join my newsletter, cltmarketbuzz.com, cltmarketbuzz.com. I will be here Tuesday morning at 9:30. We're going to talk about the market a little bit and see what's going on since the last week. Happy Memorial Day to you. I hope you have a wonderful weekend. Please remember our fallen veterans. They gave their life so we can have a Memorial Day. I wish you the best for the weekend. You'll see me out and about showing houses. But I will see you on Tuesday. Have a great one. Talk to you later. Bye.